Dear fellow coders, welcome to One Little Coder. This is day 3 of Kaggle's 30 Days of Machine Learning Challenge. I make these videos in case if you have not signed up for challenge and also if you need a video narration and some kind of support. So let's get started. So we have got lesson 2, which is functions and getting help. So you learn how to work with functions, which are reusable blocks of code, which we are going to see in a short while. And then we'll also learn how to write our phone function, and then we'll also learn how to get help. So let's get started with this tutorial. As usual, I'll leave these links in the YouTube description. If you don't check that, please check that. And if you have not subscribed to the channel, it would mean a lot to me if you subscribe, and then let me know your comments about this series. Let's get started. Click the link. And if you have not signed into Kaggle, you need to make sure that you sign into Kaggle for you to use this. So if you're not familiar with those things, look at the first day 1 video and then you might get some idea. So now, okay, we're going to learn about getting help first. One of the important things about being a good programmer is how better you can help yourself when you're stuck in a situation. And the first thing that you should always turn towards when you're stuck in an issue is the inbuilt help. So a lot of people, I should say a lot of people struggle to do this thing because every time they might probably start with Google or any other search engine, and also they might look for a help, and they might even look for a mentor, right? So this is what a lot of people would do whenever they're stuck with an issue. But what I would say is the first thing that you should probably pay attention is you should look for help within the internal documentation. Whatever internal documentation that you have, that is the first thing that you should focus on. So let's see how to do that. The simplest way for you to do that, assuming that you're not using any ID or anything, is using the help function. So the help function, whenever you use help function and then pass on the other function that you want help for, it will give you whatever that function is, like whatever that function is supposed to do. For example, when you say help of round and then you say round of number, and then it's telling you what are the arguments it has, and then it is telling you what it's supposed to do, round a number to a given precision in decimal digits, and then it also says what kind of things it returns. Okay, return value is an integer if n digits is omitted or none, otherwise blah blah blah. So the thing that you can understand from this is, first of all, what is the function, like what are the arguments that are in the function, and then you can also understand a little bit of description about what the function does. So it's very important for you to use help function as much as possible. And remember that you should, like the common pitfall that they've suggested is, whenever you want help, you should pass on the function name, not call a function. So which probably we might see in detail, and you might get clarity about it. And to quickly show you, so help of round is what you should say. You should not say help of round of minus 2.01. so like you don't have to call a function. This is calling a function. You have to mention the function name so that you can get the help. So this is what they've given us, when you want help, like you give help print and then you get to know what to do with this. Now what I might also show you is a little bit extra about how to help. Of course, that's the point of this video, right? Otherwise you can just go to this link and then learn everything yourself. So the other things that I would probably do, for example, if I want help, for example, I do not know how to print new line in Python. I think this is something that you might have seen in the previous video also. So if I don't know how to print new line in Python, when I especially print, so a couple of things I might do. I use DuckDuckGo. So what I might do is I might use bang so, and then I would say print new line in Python, and then I would type enter. So this is the first thing that I would probably do, which is, of course, they want me to confirm if I'm not a robot, which I think I'm not a robot. Okay, so when I do this thing, you can see that it's going to take me to the most popular results. So the first result is how to print without a new line. Oh, the first result is how to print without a new line, but what we want is we want to print with a new line. So again, you can see all these things are telling you how to print with a new line. So now let's see if we can see the actual answer. Okay, so the first attempt of us trying to find how to print a new line did not help us, but this is what I would do first. So the second thing I would do is I would probably go to Google and say print new line in Python, and then I would see the result. So I'm going to see, okay, print Python new line and how to print Python without new line. This is, I don't want this thing. And then how to print a line break in a Python function. This looks like something that you might want. And let's quickly read. Okay, add a new line character in Python, 6 ways. So there is a ask Python question, and when you look at it, you can see the answer, which is /n. So /n is the answer. So it says we can easily use /n before every string where we want to print new line. So what I have done is I had a problem which is more than a simple function, right? Like I know print is what I want to use, but I don't know how to do that with print. So the first thing that I go is Stack Overflow and then try to look for the answer, but I did not get the answer in my case. Maybe I didn't search properly. So the second thing I do is I go to Google and try to give a little bit more details about what my problem is. And then you might have seen, I didn't search for, how typically people would search, oh, how to print a new line. I'm not searching like this. Means I don't say that anything when you do like this is wrong, but what I'm saying is, like, you are of course asking a search engine. All you have to care about is a couple of keywords, and that should help you start with. And we found out that /n, when we use /n, that will help us print a new line. So if you are stuck getting help before even you look for any human being, start with the internal documentation. Second, go to what did I say? Go to Stack Overflow. Third, go to Google and then start looking for the resource. And the fourth option is, if you still like it, this is all fine for the base Python, right? Like the option that is already present in Python. But if you want something that is part of a package, for example, pandas, I would definitely go look for pandas documentation. First thing, go to pandas documentation and then click here, and then probably you can start like search the docs. Okay, in pandas documentation, I want to know if I can read a JSON. Okay, read JSON, and I would click this. Do I see any result? Yes, I have a result. Like it says there is a function, so I can directly go here and get it, so that I have the most recently updated answer than anything else. Let it be blog post, let it be Stack Overflow answer, let it be Google search result. All these could be slightly outdated possible. But if I go to the documentation page and get the result, there is no way this is outdated, because of course every developer, or every good developer, at least like developers like pandas, who manages pandas, they would make sure that the documentation is updated to the latest. So you just go to pandas documentation and then look for the latest latest function, and then get the details from the. So this is getting help, like more than what Kaggle has mentioned, but you can start with what Kaggle has mentioned. After that, now let us get into functions. First of all, what is function, right? So before we even get into it, I would like to tell you about 3 kinds of functions. First of all, let me do that. First function is system defined. Okay, system defined function. What is system defined function? System defined functions are functions like ABS, or the ones that we just saw, which is print. So like either print or ABS, or even for that matter help. So these kind of functions are called system defined functions, because you are not somebody who creates this function. These functions exist before even you create a function. Okay, so they have a purpose and they exist there. Function, as the name suggests, there is a functionality and they exist. Then, and the second type of function I would say is, like I was telling you about pandas, read JSON. So this is a function now. What is this function supposed to do? This function is not necessarily a system defined function, because this function comes from the pandas library. So this is a function which is also written by somebody else for you, but it is not part of base Python. So it comes from a library. So whenever you want to use read JSON, you need to always import pandas library. Okay, so this is the second type of function. Now the third type of function is what we call as UDF. What is UDF? User defined functions. Like before even I could say that got vanished, but that's okay. UDF stands for user defined function. So 3 kinds of function: built-in function or system defined function, functions from libraries, and then the third is UDF, user defined function. In this section, we're going to primarily focus on UDF, user defined function. Why? We know system defined function that is already available, so we don't have to do anything with that. And functions from libraries, we can get it directly like this. So now, how do you define a user defined function? Like, how do you define a user defined function? So the thing that you have to understand first is, before even defining user defined function, is why do I want a user defined function? Like, like what is the point of user defined function? Now let's look at a quick example. So do they have an example here? They don't have an example here. So to quickly show you an example, I might do something which is, I'll open a new Kaggle notebook. So let me hide the toolbar for now. Let me open a new Kaggle notebook. And I would like to demonstrate you why do you need a function in the first place. A new notebook, new notebook, new notebook. How do I create a new notebook? So go here to the code, new notebook. And then that notebook ideally comes with Python, so we are good. Why do we need functions? Okay, I don't want any of these things. So the first thing that I'm going to show you is start my machine. After I start my machine, in this case, like Kaggle is actually giving me a machine, kind of a charity. So let's say I want to print something. Okay, what do I want to print? I want to print saying, for example, let's talk about different products. So there are different products, like I can say I love JavaScript. Okay, and then I'm going to say I love Python. I'm going to say I love R. I'm going to say one more language, just Spark. Okay, maybe just add one more, PyTorch. I'll convert Spark into SQL. Okay, so this is what I want to say. So I want to say I love Spark, I love Java, I love JavaScript, I love Python, I love R, I love SQL, I love PyTorch. So now imagine this list is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines of code. Imagine we have like hundreds like this. So now I have to type hundreds of lines for me to print this. So if I do not have this last word, which is only changing, what I can simply do is I can, if let's say like if print of I love is what I want to print, like let's say like 20 times, I can do something like this. I can simply say, okay, just we found out new line. So I can do something like this and print the same thing without any change in number of times. That's why loops exist, like either operator overloading or loops exist for that purpose. Like for example, like I in the range of 0 to 20 print I love, it prints. So if nothing changes, I can simply do this. But now what if I want to change only one thing here? That's the whole point, right? What if I want to change only one thing here? Do I have to actually print 100 lines of code, or can I do something? And that is where the whole concept of reusability comes into picture. What is reusability? Reusability is if you want to use a code again and again and again for the same functionality with a very little change, you want to create something, that's what we call as function, so that you can use that function and do this functionality and with very little change in the code, which means your code is more readable. Like it's better to read the code, right, than having like something like this 20 lines of code. So your code is more readable. At the same time, your code has reusable blocks. Let me show you what I mean, and then you will be able to understand. So what am I going to do? I'm going to create a user defined function. Let me add a comment, user defined function, and say define I love. My user defined function name is going to be I love. So it is always a good practice for you to give a detailed function name. Don't give something like this. Oh, define I, define A. It doesn't make any sense. Your A might be different from my A. So just don't do that. So I love, or even you can say print I love. So you can do like this. And then anytime you define a function, okay. So there are two things, first of all, before even going into this. When you create a function, it's called definition or declaration. When you want to invoke a function or use a function, it's called call a function. Okay, so now in this step, we are actually defining a function. We are not calling a function, we're just defining a function for the first time before even the function exists. I am a user, I'm defining a function, so it's called a user defined function. When I have to create a function, this is a function name, I can specify a few arguments, like it's called argument, or you can call it parameter also, based on like nobody is going to hold you faulty for you to make this mistake? Okay, so I can define an argument and say what is that thing I want to come inside this function, like what information I want to pass into this function. That's my argument. So in this case, I want language is like programming name, and say I can define a default value for it. My default value is going to be space. Like if you do not give anything, I'm going to just print I love space. Then I'm going to give a colon, which is like in the previous class we saw, which is to say that this is my indentation. Let me zoom it up a little bit. Oh, that's quite a lot. Okay, this is better. And I'm going to say print I love space plus language. In this case, plus means string concatenation. It combines two string. Okay, so at this point I'll run this, and we have the function defined. Like you can see, it is successfully ran, and then the function is defined. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say print I love. I'm going to call the function. So like call the function that we just defined. Okay, oops, sorry. Print I love, and then if I don't give anything, it just says I love because my default argument is space. Now you might ask me like, hey, what does happen if I don't give a default argument? Let's try that as well. Like I said in the previous classes as well, it's very important for you to make mistakes so that you can become a better programmer. Am I a better programmer? That's a very good question. I'm not sure, but yeah, at least you can become a better programmer. So it says missing one required positional argument. Okay, this was required and we missed it, so it's always better to have something so that it doesn't shout at us. So now what is the language that I want to give? I want to say probably Python, because we are coding in Python. So it says I love Python. Maybe instead of this, let me try a snake. Okay, will it print? I don't know. It prints. Okay, so the language that I love is Python, and it prints. So now imagine I want to print like 20 of these. Can I do that? I can of course do that, but before that, let's understand one more thing, which is when I pass an argument, like that's called pass an argument or a parameter like this, I have to make sure that it is in the same position like that. Like if I have multiple arguments, then I have to say like it has to be in the same position. Let me add a suffix equal to space. Again, I'm going to say suffix here. So my suffix is here is suffix equal to so much. So when I say I love Python so much, so I can have any suffix. So now I have got two arguments. Now if I do not specify it like this, which we call as named arguments, if I do not call the function with named arguments, then I have to make sure the position is intact. So first is language, second is suffix, that is intact. If that doesn't happen by mistake, if I mess up with the position, then you know what is going to happen. I love space so much Python, so it doesn't make any sense, right? It's the code executes, but still there is a semantic error, so we don't want that to happen. So either use named argument, which is always preferable, or make sure the position is right. So now this works. Now my question is, how can I, like, the whole point I brought you into this function argument is how do you make sure that you do this something like this without actually printing like 10-20 lines? And that's what we want to see. So we have not covered for loop. I think probably they might do it in the next class. So but I just want to quickly show you how you might do this, because we have already defined a function. You don't have to define the function again and again every time you want to call a function. You can call a function just like this: the function name, open bracket, the argument's value, and then close the bracket, and then the function gets executed. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say for, okay, first I need the list of languages. Like I'm going to call languages is equal to, I'm going to say R Py JS, JS, what else? This is SQL, Spark, TF, PyTorch. I mean, these are not languages, but that's okay. Excuse me for my poor choice of variable name. One more thing, I don't know. I feel bad to add Java to this list. So maybe what do I add? What is one more language that we all love to use? Maybe I would add Julia. Okay, so now I have a list of languages, like I said in the previous video, that whenever you want to store a value with more than one of same type, you use list. So languages is a list. And how do we know it's a list? Type of languages, and then you get it. So list is ready. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say for language in languages. Again, we will see for loop later. So for now, just know that I'm going to go one by one in this list, and then I'm going to pick the value every time, and I'm going to pick that value and pass it on to this value, which is, instead of this Python hard-coded, I'm going to say language. Did I make any mistake? So I'm going to say language every time I'm going to pick value. So every time this is going to come here, this is going to come here, every time this comes here, I'm going to print. So you can see with a decent amount of readable code, which means I know where the function is defined, where the languages are defined, and I'm going to call the function within a for loop. I have made sure that the code doesn't look as messy as this. And the problem in this, I'll let you know. Like, let's say if you want to change something here, now you have to change here, and then you have to figure out how is it happening. But in this case, all you have to do is, oh, do I want to add a new language? I don't have to do anything other than say, let's say again, like I have to look for a new language, which is, I really like TensorFlow.js, which is, even though if it's a JavaScript, I'll just add it because I like it. So TensorFlow.js, and then I'm going to just type. So obviously now I have a new language at the end. So I'm not touching this code, which is actually to print. So the purpose of this part is to print. I'm not doing anything there also. I'm not touching my function. All I'm doing is I'm going to my languages and adding. So you understand that how your code is more reusable because you have written this function. Also, how easy it is to manage this code and edit this code, so that you can start reusing this code again and again. So the primary objective of function is reusability. Let me save this notebook. I'll link this in the description as well. I'll make it public. I think we have never shown how to make something public. I'm going to show you share, private, public, which means anybody on Kaggle, anybody on the internet, of course, with this particular link, public, with this link can actually see this notebook. And also good practice, add tags. Python, do I have a tag? Python, okay, beginner, okay, done, save it. So which means I'll link this in the YouTube description, which means you can also see this notebook. So getting back to what we initially started to do, which is now function. Let's go through the Kaggle curriculum. I just wanted to take you slightly off track and explain you the reasons, so it's easier for me to show you. So the primary objective of using a function is you reusing the building block. So the building block here is this block, so that you get to reuse it again and again. And one important aspect that you have to notice here is return. So there are two kinds of functions which we will see soon. One is function with return, function without return. I'll get into the details. So now one important thing that we do not see in the previous example is docstring. What is a docstring? So we saw that whenever we write a function, whenever we want help for a function, we say help of print, and then it prints something, right? Very nice, beautiful. For somebody who doesn't know what print supposed to do, it will help them. But what if you define a function, which is user defined function? How would somebody know what to do with the function? Very good question, right? And that is what docstring is supposed to solve. Inside docstring, you write a small description and give a small example. So whenever somebody says help of the user defined function that you created, it's going to return whatever you wrote. That is an amazing thing to do. Why? Because the code that you write is not for you to read, for somebody else's to read. This is a favorite quote. I don't know who said this thing, but I've been using it in everywhere I teach Python or any programming language. So make sure that the code that you write can be read by somebody else, which also means you give them as much as resources as possible. So make sure that you add docstring, which is a very nice practice a lot of people lack. So that docstring that you write will get displayed whenever somebody uses help as part of your user defined function. So the next thing is that we wanted to say is function that has return, function that doesn't have return. Like, what is return in the first place? So like we saw initially, a function is a building block, a small block, code block that is supposed to do something. Now when you do that something, what we call as something, sometimes you want to return something back to the universe from which this function was called. Sometimes you don't want to return. So in our example, if you see, the stuff inside the function is one different universe. From where you call the function is a different universe. So when you are passing something to the function, into the function, sometimes you want to get back something from the function. So when you pass something, sometimes you want to get back something. In this case, we are not getting back anything because we are just printing, but sometimes you want to get back something, and that's where return works. So instead of printing this, I might say my result, and I'm going to then I'm going to return result. So now what happens when this kind of function is called is, you can see that I can assign this value into something. I can say result value is equal to this, and then I can do something else with that. For example, I can say every time you get a result value, print it twice. I can do something like this. I can do crazy stuff, or I can even say this is my result. I can say this is my result, this is my result, and I can press result value. And when you see this thing, you can see like I've taken the result and I've done something, which means I was able to get the result back and then do something rather than like just printing it here itself. So this is the advantage of result. So everything you do inside this function stays inside this function. It's like what they say about Las Vegas, right? Anything that you do in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. So like the same way, anything you do within this function stays within this function. It's called local scope. But what if you want to return it? You just use return and you get it back here, and then you do whatever you want. And that's what we are seeing: function with return and functions that don't return. In this case, the function is not returning anything, and that's what, like when you try to print the return, it shows none, none, none. None is similar to null, NA, whatever language you come from, which means nothing exists there. And when you have a return, then when you call the function, whatever return value will get printed. So function with return, without return. And then we just spoke about default arguments. So when like there are some functions that when you create, you want to define what is the default value so that it doesn't throw an error. So that's what default argument is about. And one important concept is you can send another function as an argument to a different function. So let me say that again. You can pass on an argument, like you pass an argument, right? Like you pass a value for an argument. You can supply functions as arguments to another function. So this is the primary concept of functional programming paradigm. So in programming, there are two broader categories of paradigms, like concepts, philosophies, school of thoughts, maybe. One is object-oriented programming, which is what you would probably do a lot when you get into machine learning. The second is functional programming, where everything is a function. You take a function, send a function, all these things. So the same way, you can take a function like this and pass it on as an argument to another function. Let us see a quick example. I don't want to emphasize a lot in this space. It might be a little confusing if you are a beginner, but if you are not a beginner, please spend a little bit of time, so it might help you as well. So now imagine like you have a function already defined, like this is a function and there is an argument for this function call. Let me get my pencil. That should be probably helpful. Okay, so I have a function already and I have an argument for my function which is call. Now what I have actually done here is I have called the function within a function. So which means if you see this, I have a function defined multiply by 5 that takes an argument x and then it returns 5 by x. And I have another function which says squared call and it takes an argument function and it takes another argument. And I have another function that says call and it takes an argument function and it has another argument. But what it returns, if you see, it returns a function of argument. So which means whatever function you pass here, this argument goes inside that function and it does whatever it has to do, and then it returns the output. The same thing here, it's like double. So like, I don't know if you have seen Inception, this is like dream, this is like dream within a dream, like multiple stages of dream, and there is a nice name for it. It's called higher order functions. Like, it's called higher order functions. So again, you don't have to understand everything that I'm saying at this point, but it might be helpful. So what happens when we call it? So when we call multiply by 5 and we pass 1, so this one first, this is a function, right? So this gets called here. And what is the function name? Function name is multiply by 5 and argument is 1, so it goes here. So multiply by 5 and argument is 1. Now this, because the function is multiply by 5, it goes here and then the argument is 1, so 5 into 1, result is 5. That's why you see 5 here. So what happens when you call squared call multiply by 5? So now this calls this one, so the function name is multiply by 5. So multiply by 5 of multiply by 5 and of 1. So multiply by 5 and output of this would be 5 into 1 is 5. So now you pass 5 inside this, multiply by 5 of 5. So 5 into 5 is 25. That's what you see, 5 and 25. Again, this is good to know, especially if you're interested in functional programming. You can spend more time on it. These things are called higher order functions. You may not do this kind of function anytime soon, but it's always good to know. So there is an example that they've given, how it is helpful. You should definitely check it out yourself. Now at the end of this, we have successfully finished the second, or I should say third day, where we learned how to get help. We learned about functions. So now let's start with what? Hide screen brush. Let's start with exercise. Once you get into exercise, you know, like you get a Kaggle notebook. Probably by this time you should be familiar. Start the machine and then let's do exercise. Again, a disclaimer and probably like a spoiler alert. If you want to do exercise yourself, it's not a matter of if you want to do, you should do exercise yourself. Please do not follow along. But after you do exercise, if you want to know how did I do, please follow along. So, but do not blindly follow this tutorial. Like that defeats the whole purpose, right? You don't want to copy a guy doing an exercise and then do it. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So do it yourself. But this is like for people who get stuck, and if you want to, validate what you did. Okay, so the first question is, complete the body of following function according to its docstring. Okay, Python has a built-in function round. So round to 2 places. Now replace this body with your own code. Pass is a keyword that does literally nothing. We used it as a placeholder. Like, another thing, pass will just continue the code function. It will not do anything. So what is objective? Like, what are we supposed to do? Use it as because we began. So they're saying that we need to write a function that would round off something. So what we can do is, we know there is a built-in function called round, but do you know what it does? I don't know what it does. So let's first seek help. Round. Oh, round is a number. It takes a number and then it gives you round off. And in this case, how many round digits we need to round off? 2 digits. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I'm going to say, first delete this. I'm going to say round off num into comma 2. So which means take this number, round it off to 2 digits and return it. So there are 2 ways I can do. I can assign it to a temporary variable and then I can return it. I can do this, or I can do it slightly one less. I can do like this, return off round off 2. Run it. It's correct. Thank you so much. So the next thing is, the help for round says that n digits, the second argument may be negative. What do you think will happen when you do it? Again, this is a very good thing, right? You do round off 2.2 like this, and then you do -2. What happens when you do negative? It returns 0. Oh, when you do -3, what it does? No, nothing. So can you think of a case where it would be useful? And once you are ready, can you run the code? Okay, let's try that. So what if it is like 200.3 and minus 23? Okay, does it help? Okay, does it help? Doesn't seem to be helping. Okay, so let's look for solution. So as you can see, minus 1 rounds to the nearest 10th digit, minus 2 rounds to the nearest 100th digit. So the example that they have given is, if you have something like this and you wanted to, like round it off to the nearest so and so digit, remember you cannot give comma here, so you can say like this, minus 3, it would round off to this, so nearest 1th, 100th, 1000th, whatever. So that is the use of it. Now the third question is again to smash. I think these people like smashing thing. So in the previous exercise, the candy sharing like you might have done it. If they collectively bring 91, they take each 30, smash one. Below is a simple function that will calculate the number of candies to smash. Okay, total number of candies to smash. So when you run this output, again, this is an important thing you need to note. So when you learn this thing, potentially if you appear for any machine learning interview, your interview might happen on a platform like, let's say, HackerRank, Codility, HackerEarth, whatever the platform is. So there you might have to actually write a code like this and they would verify it. So when you get a practice of this thing, you are actually preparing your future self for a failure proof interview, something like that. Okay, so it's good. Return the number of leftover candies that must be smashed after distributing blah blah blah. So when you send this, it should return. Simple. Does it look simple? Okay, so they're saying below is a simple function. Modify it so that it optionally takes a second argument representing the number of friends. Where is number of friends represented? Here. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to say number of friends. Why do I have to give it? I can just simply say friends. Okay, and I can get that friends value here, and then, but if you do not give anything, it should assume that you have 3 friends. Okay, I'm going to say 3. By default the value is 3, but if you have a different value, you can give. Let's run this. It's correct. Absolutely, we have nailed it. So how do you want to verify it? You can go here, take to smash, and then say example 91,3. If I don't give 3, 1. But what if I want to give a different value, 91,4? Okay, there is a different value. What if what is divided by, like, what gives 1 as value? Maybe 96, 97, 1. Okay, so you know how this thing works. So we have a doc string, we are returning the value. So they asked us to change only this value, which was hard coded before, to make it dynamic. Again, this is a word, hard coded before, make it more dynamic, adding a parameter argument. So there is a second argument, but which is not without a default value. So there is a default value, and at the end of this, we have successfully managed to, there is an optional. It may not be fun, but reading and understanding error messages will be an important part of your Python career. Definitely. The better you read somebody else's code, the more you understand the errors that you get, you will definitely be much better Python programmer than what you were before for any programming language. A lot of people make this mistake. Oh, I've got an error, just copy and paste it on Google. Don't do that. First read the error, try to make sense. Each code cell below contains some commented buggy code. For each cell, read the code, predict what you think will happen when it is run. Then uncomment the code and then see what happens. Like, the way you can uncomment is Control/. If you're on Mac, you can do Command/ as well. Then fix the code. Okay, let me read this. And when I read this, it looks like I have the function that we created here says round to 2 places, and if you see here, you might see a typo. I think that's what happens. Let's uncomment it and then run it. It says name round 2. So it says like, oh, you are trying to call a function, but that function is never defined. And then the reason it assumes it's never defined is because there is a typo. Done. First thing done. Second thing, X is equal to minus 10, y is equal to 5. Which of the two variables above has the smallest absolute value? So minimum of ABS X comma y, and when you call this, will there be an error? Absolute value. Which of the two variable has the smallest absolute value? So when you call this, will there be an absolute error? So absolute of 5 comma 10 is 5 comma 10, and then minimum is 5. When you say minimum, 5 will print. So smallest absolute value. So technically it should work fine. So I'm not still understanding what is going wrong. Oh, what is going wrong? ABS takes only one argument, but two arguments have been given. So you can understand that ABS, absolute function, takes only one argument, right? Why did you give two arguments? So it has to be like this: ABS of X comma ABS of Y, and then you just run it, and maybe we can print it as well. Another tip, if you want to print it, you can just enclose it like this. Oh, did I just do that? Okay, maybe it doesn't work here. What am I talking? Okay, I don't have to assign it to something. Sorry, 5 is the answer, so that works. So the next thing is, we have a function f of x, y is equal to ABS of x, return y. Again, it's quite interesting error a lot of people, beginners, make. What is the error? If you look at this, the indentation, because you have colon, indentation is here, but when you say return, it is outside the indentation, so it must throw an error. Oh, return is outside the function. That's a very nice error. So go back, return at 5. Nice job. So at this point, we have successfully managed to learn function, how to get help. In the next section, we are going to learn about conditionals. So I'm looking forward for day 4. If you have any comments, please let me know in the comment section. Otherwise, check out the YouTube description, share the video with your friends, and then let me know your thoughts. Stay safe. See you tomorrow.